Hey everybody, how's it going?
Hello. Long time no see.
Yeah, feels like years, gosh.
Years.
And my cats are still eerily and blurrily behind me, and they will probably stay that way for a while. So
Active participant, they want to learn. They're
They
here
do.
to
Want to
learn.
learn.
they're excited as
They'll
well.
have active shadows in the background for sure. So
Mhm.
awesome. Okay, so we're going to go through each part of domain of one's own and what makes up the process and account creation, management, all that good stuff through the main WordPress portal, the WHMCS instance, which stands for Web Host Management Client System, something like that. There's all sorts of acronyms going around with it. And WHM, which is Web Host Manager, which is the server portion of the site. So we'll go in depth for about an hour on this, and then we'll move into the recorded sessions, which go into more depth, more in detail on specific processes and all of that good stuff. So whenever we're ready, Amanda, you want to jump into WordPress?
Yeah. Let's do it. All right. So I'm going to go through, a lot of us are going to be using this demo school that we have, institution that we have set up. So we call it State University. And this is kind of a massive site because we use it to allow people trials and to go in and play around. It's literally called a playground for learning. So I'm just going to use this to walk you through what the domain of one's own WordPress interface looks like. As Meredith said, this is the forward-facing interface amongst the three systems that make up the entire domain of one's own project platform. And so to many of you here, this probably looks very familiar. You either have something extremely similar to this for your own domain of one's own setup, or you saw it before you played around with it and made it look much different maybe. And so I am already logged in as an admin. So you can see this very detailed dashboard at the top. Essentially what this is a WordPress wrapper around what's going to be cPanel when we get into that section as well. And so all of this is going to have a very WordPressy feel to it. So you have a couple tabs on the homepage here. This homepage tab where we have it set up so that you can go ahead and get started if this is your first time visiting. And then there's a dashboard tab and a documentation tab. And before I go into those, I will show you some other things first so you can see it from a user perspective. So let's start by going into the admin tab here, which will take you to a very familiar looking WordPress dashboard. And so you can see in here, again, it's robust. And one of the first things we can look at is the plugins that kind of set up your view in this platform interface, as well as the capabilities that you have, as well as that your users have. So this is something obviously that is only visible to the admins. Regular users are not going to see this section, and that is enabled by this Remove Dashboard Access plugin. So when a typical user is signed in, they will have a little bar up here, but it will be extremely limited with the types of places and views that they can access. We also have there's this little blur user info. You won't have that. I have that, and you'll see what it does, but it's essentially just keeping everything private when we go in to look at users. But other things are like gravity forms. That is something that we have been using the past year or so to replace Ninja forms for things like sign up. And so we'll go a bit into that. And we have another very powerful, that's my cat, another very powerful plugin that we use is this user switching plugin, which allows us to, as administrators, go into and kind of spoof as our users' accounts and see what's going on from their perspective in through the WordPress interface. So the first thing we can do here is go ahead and look at, let's look at the users. So as you can see, this is all blurred for privacy, and because we have a lot of people here. We've got, you know, over 5,000 users. Again, these are areas that are really important for you to keep track of, so you know your numbers, how many people you have signed up, because there are limits with certain project plans. And so you can see the username, their display name, their email, and then their role. And depending on how you have things set up, a very popular way to approach Domain of One's Own is to have a sign-up process. And so this process is accomplished through Gravity Forms, where you can have your users sign up through single sign-on and kind of be kept in this limbo space, depending on how you set it up, where their role here is defaulted to like a subscriber role, so that they have very limited access until you give them access. So if you have the sign up form, you can ask them to justify, you know, what they're using it for, if that matters to you, or if you just want to see what people are using it for, and you don't need to make a judgment call, but you still want to kind of keep track of everyone who's coming in. Then you can go in and manually switch their roles. So if this particular user, we wanted to change their role, we would select the user. And if they were a subscriber, we would bump them up to author, but they're already author, so that's fine. And then once they're an author, they're able to do things like create a site and get going with cPanel and their dashboard. We're going to go more into what actually happens behind the scenes when we go into the WHMCS portion of this session. Because this whole WordPress interface is interacting directly with WHMCS, which is then interacting with the server. So all of it is connected.
Yeah, and just to quickly add on, you'll note that everybody here is an author. We didn't go in and manually change all 5,000 of these people. So if you don't want to deal with that manual step, you can just say, you know what, make everybody an author. This is getting that data is great, but I don't have time in my day to go in and approve every submission.
Yeah, and if you have a plan that can accommodate that, and your project is not something that is super widespread throughout campus, so that it's like everyone is going to be using it at some point, and it's kind of for a select group, then that could be the most efficient way to do things. You don't want to make things harder for yourself.
Yeah, do you want to go through and show how we can change the default role really quick before we go into that?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's under settings,
right.
down towards the bottom, and then under general or users. Yeah, under new default user role or new user default role, if you switch that to subscriber, that is when the user signs in through SSO, they'll be prompted to fill out that user request form. And then when you switch them to author, they'll automatically be shown the sign up form, which is then the communication between WHMCS and WHM, then to embed the cPanel dashboard after sign up. So author is important to see the cPanel dashboard, but you can pick whichever option you want, subscribers or author, as you sign up on that side.
Yeah, and as you add admins as well, you would follow the same process I showed earlier, where you go to that specific user who's signed up, who's your admin, select them specifically, and then you can change their role right from this screen.
Yep.
Cool. Cool. Anything else about users we want to touch on?
I think that's everything.
So moving on then, we're going to implement that plugin that I mentioned earlier of user switching. So this is where things are going to get pretty cool, pretty techy, without you having to really understand what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and look up my account here, which is all blurred, but it's me. And you can hover over this section where the username is, and you get these various options, but the last one here should be switch to. And again, that should be added by default as part of your WordPress setup with domain of one's own. And so as I switched in here, you may have noticed that my role was author. And in this scenario, I, as a user, had already gone in and signed up my my subdomain for my domain of one's own membership and selected reclaimamanda.stateu.org. So if you have subdomains as your setup on domain of one's own, then that's kind of what your students will look like, what they'll be able to choose right off the bat. And as you can see, I am popped right into a cPanel, and I still have my WordPress looking toolbar right at the top, but it's obviously very limited based on, compared to what we saw earlier when we were in admin. And this is really where students and users, depending on who your users are. I always default to students in my head because when I was an administrator, it was students on the campus that I was working on. So, but you may just have faculty or staff or whoever, but they will have this view here. And we are able to play around a little bit with this view. So if you didn't want like email to be an option for your users, then there is a way to turn that off, and we have documentation for that. And you can always message us about it to ask. And then if you turn that off, it will not even show up. It won't even show up as this little email tab. It will just be completely gone, so that you can give your users a more focused and narrow pathway through their cPanel, depending on how you want them to use it. Yeah.
Awesome. We can go through looking at signing up if you want.
Sure.
We can switch back to the main administrator, and then we can use one of my accounts on StateU to show what the sign up form looks like once you're embedded.
Right. And while you were, in a already signed up account, that's also where you are able to go in and really dig deep on a troubleshooting level to see exactly what might be going on if they're having issues. So so this is bringing us right to a sign up page, page where you would register that subdomain. But this is for our admin. Do you still want to go to your user, Meredith?
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what the view would look like for a new student. So you're able to select your specific domain name. You can even designate the subdomain itself. So if you want to utilize your single sign-on username as your subdomain for organization, we can also set that up for you to autofill based on your the user's single sign-on. So that's also really, really easy there.
Yeah, I just quickly noting that this is what you'll see if you're an author. There's sort of the request form and the sign up form, and the request form is for submitting that, hey, can I have this when you're a subscriber, giving that sort of description of your project data. This is, once they've been approved, the actual form that they will use to set up their account. So this is not the place where you would be collecting that sort of initial project data.
Right. So they're able to select their subdomain here. So I just used reclaim admin. And then this is already autofilled to state.stateu.org. And then from here, you will select the check button because it has to check and make sure that no one else has that domain, that subdomain. And then it will have you review your selection so that you know for sure that you want to use reclaimadmin.stateu.org. And it's good to be sure about this before going forward because it can be a little bit of a hassle to change. And you can either start over or continue. And then it's going to have this sign up section, and it's going to provide an address for confirmation. This is probably just going to be your university address for all of your users. They don't have to put in their specific addresses. It'll just be associated with the college or the institution. And then complete sign up. And this is going to take a little bit, just a few seconds, because this is where it's doing a lot of very hard work integrating this new site that it's setting up into the rest of the system that we're talking about in this session. So it's starting things up in WHMCS. And as you can see, we're popped into another cPanel. Something that you might notice right off the bat is that scary red section over here. And that's saying this is a self-signed certificate and it has a little lock, but it's unlocked, and that's can be jarring. You don't want that, but it's fine because essentially it's going to resolve itself. You just got to give it a little bit. You got to give it some credit. It's doing a lot of work here. It's catching up with everything. And that should assign an actual certificate in just a few minutes. So if a user is concerned about that and comes to you about it, just wait a few minutes and then it'll be assigned.
Absolutely. And we're talking about Auto SSL issuing a SSL certificate to load the site securely in the browser. That runs every 30 minutes or so. So it doesn't run until after the account is created because of DNS needs to be loading on the server before the certificate is issued. So it'll show show the self-signed certificate for a little bit, but it should be all set there. So yeah, I can move into WHMCS if we want. Or is there anything else with WordPress?
Yeah, I just, was able to look in the chat briefly and saw that Lee mentioned that so many students get confused between a cPanel WordPress versus their WordPress install. So, and I really like the way that Meredith just pointed out that looking at the main WordPress as a portal is definitely the way to go. It definitely can be confusing because WordPress is something that a lot of people use their domain of one's own account to run. But it's also, just important to keep in mind that that's the framework that we're providing access through. So it can be tricky to keep them in line, but it's important.
Yeah, so the way that Amanda was explaining the WordPress side is the StateU portal to domain of one's own, and then the dashboard embed is the cPanel itself on that side. So now that the account is created in WordPress, that was throughout that whole setup process, the WordPress site was communicating with WHMCS. And we went through their order form to sign up for the account. And then once the submission happened, WHMCS then processed to create the account on WHM. So I am going to talk through what WHMCS looks like from the back end. If you need to do any troubleshooting or anything like that, I will preface this is the most recent version of WHMCS. A lot of our product still is on older versions, so your view may not look like this, but most of the info is about the same. So we'll look at like products and services and contact details and all of that good stuff in order creation. So just prefacing that this is an updated version, so some of the features may be a little different or look a little different to you. And it's important for your support team on the ground to have their own WHMCS administrator set up. So if you need to, let us know and we can create a new one for each admin. That's really helpful to work on client management on that side. So I'm going to search for my user here, and that will bring up a list of users. Also to show some inactive users, you can toggle off to show if like someone was suspended accidentally, or if you're restoring a terminated user to the profile, they'll have a inactive status because the product is no longer active in WHM. But I have my Meredith test. I'm also going to zoom in just a bit, just in case things are a little bit smaller on there. So I'm going to click into my product, and this will give you an overview of what's going on within the product itself, and the user that just created their account. So when we go through the sign up page. Some details are important, like the domain name. So if you need to search on WHM, you can grab that There's also the cPanel username and the cPanel password listed. This is used for SSH connections or SFTP connections. You can change this a password at any time if you need to, using like a password generator there, and then you can use these module commands, which I'll get to in just a second, to help create and do some account actions there. You can also note the registration date. That's also really helpful if you're working through removing accounts or culling accounts. You can see when it was signed up, when the account was registered, and kind of give a guess on if it needs to be removed or anything like that. But we'll definitely go into more detail on account removal and long-term management in one of the sessions. So definitely keep track of that. You'll also want to make sure that the billing cycle is set to free. This won't process an invoice for your users. In Domain of One's Own, we're not working with invoices at all. So we want to make sure that that's set to free so the account doesn't accidentally get unsuspended. It will be the default. It's also helpful just to double check if needed, if you're troubleshooting on that side at all. From there, if your school has multiple servers set up, you want to make sure to note which server the account lives on if you need to access through WHM. WHMCS holds that information. So if you click the drop down, you'll see if there's multiple. I'm realizing that's not in my screen, but you should see a list of the number of servers you have. So if you have more than one, the accounts will be provisioned there. Excuse me, the status in the account itself should show active if the users are actively working on the account and embedded in cPanel. If you're not seeing the cPanel embed properly in the WordPress, WHMCS is definitely the way to go to check the status to see if it's active, suspended, or terminated for whatever reason. On that side, you can also unsuspend or remove the account through the module commands. And we'll definitely go into more details within the long-term management session. If you need to change the cPanel password like we did with the 1Password options, you can change the password, which will effectively sync whatever password is in this box into WHM to make sure that the cPanel embeds properly within WordPress. So if you have someone asking about a cPanel login screen when they sign into the portal, you want to check here to make sure that the cPanel password matches, and just clicking change password will definitely make sure that works. Down here, you can see a disk space quick view of metrics. I think in the older versions it's up towards the top underneath the name, but it'll give you a quick glance at like how much storage the account is using, bandwidth, and all of that good stuff, particularly looking at disk space if you need to, if you're trying to organize accounts based on disk space and usage there. Down towards the I was going to say down towards the bottom, but that does not. This is the new one view, but there's an option to resend the welcome email. So at the point of sign up, users are sent an email with their username and password, which is the cPanel username and password, if they need to use it for FTP. They can also change that on their own within the WordPress portal underneath the drop down at the top bar that Amanda was showing. So if you need to there. Admin notes are really helpful too if you need to make a note on like if there's a particular project that the person's working on, or if this is a campus-wide project like a club or anything like that. That's always really handy to keep track of. And finally, if you want to go into cPanel directly from WHMCS, you definitely can. In the older versions of WHMCS, login to cPanel is going to be right here in the middle next to username and password. In the newer ones, it's up at the top. So if you click login to cPanel, that's going to open up a session in a new tab. I'm not going to do that because my screen is shared just this window. So you can get a view of what cPanel looks like from WHM. Up here at the top, you have some more summary tab, like more action items you can do with the profile. There, the summary will give you a quick glance of every product that the user has set up. So if they have multiple projects that they're working on, you can get a view of those. The information of the user itself. You can also go into profile and adjust this if needed. Also setting the client group, which is important, and we'll go through that in long-term account management. So if you need to send any user, a group of users, information about graduation and what we do with your account and all that good stuff. So you can set the client group there. And that should be really it. Looking at the log as well, that can also tell you if something's wrong with the account. So if you can see that the order was deleted from previous years, and you can see that I created the account today for testing and all of that good stuff from there. That should really be all within WHMCS for the user side. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, while we're here, I was just going to say also that the log in WHMCS is really great just for keeping track of history, because this is really the only tool that does track that history in this particular way. WordPress doesn't do that. WordPress pushes account management business to WHMCS. WHM is more concerned with what's inside the accounts than what the history of a particular account is. And I was actually going to ask you real quick if you could go in and suspend the account that you've made.
Yes.
I will use that for my demo, and then we can also see that suspension in action in the log.
Absolutely. Okay, so I will go back to the product and service page on my profile and then click suspend here. And then you can put a reason like graduating, or if you're like suspending the account for a potential security threat or something like that, you can put the reason in and then click yes to process the suspension. The status will change to suspended, and then by default, if you don't put anything in the box, it just says overdue on payment. You'll also see a green success box showing that it went through properly. If there's any error, it'll be a red box, and then you can read more about it in the log as needed. Yeah. There. So my account is suspended. I can no longer load the page. If I go to the browser, I will see a account suspended message at the top on that side, and the user won't be able to
log in. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to log into the cPanel from there or anything like that.
Yeah. And this is useful, I think, in part. It doesn't happen super often, but if you have a user who's breaching any terms of service, terms of use that you might set out for software or hardware provided by the institution, you can go in and suspend the account, which doesn't take away any of the work. The account still exists. It's just inaccessible. And then you have the chance to sit down with the user and be like, buddy, we got to work through this. What's going on here?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to keep in mind that, as Pilot said, this doesn't get rid of the account. It just halts access. So if you're thinking about deprovisioning and stuff like that, you don't want to rely on suspending. This is kind of like a temporary holding pattern.
Yeah.
Because the account still exists on your server.
Yeah. And Meredith and I will talk more about deprovisioning tomorrow in the long-term management section. But the other thing is, because I know I'll bring this up if I remember, but we've had admins who are like, all right, I got to go through and manually hit the suspend button on every account I want to get rid of. Don't do that. We have scripts. We will do it for you.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely worth noting on that side, and then we'll go through what the process looks like for sure. So
yeah,
we've got all of that. I'm thinking through quickly just what we might want to
real quick, just to show the suspension and how that gets recorded in the log, and then
yeah, of course, that sounds good. Let me get that moved over. It'll show module suspend successful at the top of the error log. If there are any errors, sometimes you might see like a cPanel username is the same across accounts. It would throw an error like the username exists in the system, or like this one, module terminate failed, anything like that if needed. So you want to make sure you keep the product entry within your WHMCS if at all possible, to keep a record of the account. If you delete the product reference here, I think it's under more on the newer ones, or at the very bottom, you'll see like a red delete button. You definitely want to keep that around if needed, just in case someone comes back and is like, well, I actually need my account back, and you can restore it, and that sort of thing. So we want to make sure we keep that record of all accounts that are active on at one point on the server, for sure. So cool. Anything else here you guys can think of, or should we move into WHM?
No, I think we've hit just about everything. I know you guys are going to dive a little deeper into WHMCS later on, so I think we've hit all the highlights here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move into WHM, and a little wrap up on that side is that WordPress is the end user interface, and then WHMCS and WHM are the admin side. So we want to make sure that that distinction is there, that end users should not see WHMCS or WHM, and if needed, we can help with any of the back end side of things if you have any questions there. And if for whatever reason users are seeing it, let us know, because there might be something wrong there, that we can definitely take a look at on that side.
Yeah. All right. So I believe it's my turn. I'll hop in and take over and be an evil overlord, perhaps. Probably not. I'll try not to go mad with power. But so this is WHM. You may or may not be familiar with this interface. This is the server. So if WordPress, as Meredith and Amanda said, that's where the users sign in, access their cPanel account. The WHMCS is sort of that bridge that manages. WordPress will say, please create this account, or I need to show this account. Please get me the information. WHMCS will go, oh, yes, of course. And it'll talk to the server and manage that system. WHM is where information about each individual account lives in terms of what's in it, what size it is, what features it has access to, things like that. We encourage admin teams to, in general, keep access to WHM pretty limited, because WHM is very powerful. There's a lot of things you can do in here, and doing that will affect, you have the potential to affect every user on the server pretty easily. And so we generally recommend keeping the credentials for signing into WHM on a pretty need-to-know basis, restricted, just to make sure that that is sort of secure and safe. That said, we do need you to keep us aware of the credentials because we also manage the server and we will actually take care of a lot of this for you. In theory, you don't ever need to use the features in WHM. You can just write to us and say, hey, please take care of it, and we'll be happy to do that. But if you need to cycle passwords for whatever reason, someone on the team has moved on, please communicate with us so that we can make sure that our ability to access the server is still in place so that we can help do that work for you. I have a quick list of things just to run through. First, we're going to get into just list accounts because, you know, it's right front and center. It's literally the first thing there. And it is probably the thing you're going to use most. I know I used it the most when I was an admin. Also, Amanda just put something in the chat that is a great point, which is that in terms of WHM, you have the option to manage suspension and termination here at the server level. We really just don't recommend that for the reasons that we mentioned earlier. The log in WHMCS will track information on when and how that happened. WHM just isn't capable of that. So that functionality is available from WHMCS, which also the admin team that has access to WHMCS may be a little larger. So in general, we recommend handling account management through WHMCS. With that said, let's hop into list accounts. We actually don't have a blur feature for here, so I'm just going to type this very quick. So just to go through quickly, list accounts will list every single possible account that it lives on the server. Terminated accounts aren't listed here. Suspended accounts are. So I moved too fast to actually see how many accounts are on this server. I'd put it at probably like 500 and something, maybe less. But when you first check list accounts, that number will be shown here when you're on the main list, not when you've searched for something. That number is what counts towards your license. So your license might be 500, it might be 1,000, it might be 1,500 accounts. So if you have 400 out of 500 accounts, that number here is what's being tracked, not how many people have signed into WordPress or have signed or are recorded in WHM. That's not number of cPanel accounts because some people may log in without ever setting up an account. So list accounts is super useful. It's a great place to get a quick overview of all of the information. So Christine, the number isn't being shown right now because I searched for one particular account. And so it's just showing me that one account. But if I were to be looking at the entire list, the number would be shown right here. I'm going to stay searched for this one account because it's our sample account that Meredith just created. And for the sake of user privacy, Amanda was using that blur feature in WordPress earlier. We don't have a blur feature available on WHM. And so we're just going to look at Meredith's account for this. So just for the overview, you have the domain, you have this little cPanel button, the IP address, the username, the contact email, the day it was made, where it lives, how much storage it's allowed to take up, how much storage it's actually taking up, what package it has available, and we'll get back to packages later. I do have that on my list. The theme, so just what it'll be styled as, what it'll look like, and then some more information. Oh, and for example, when it was suspended. So I asked Meredith to suspend this as part of my demonstration, just to show you suspended accounts are highlighted in red. There's also this information on the date it was suspended pretty recently. And so this cPanel button, in theory, would log us into Meredith's cPanel. in the same way that that one button in WHMCS will bring you in, and that switch to button in WordPress will bring you in. If I use it right now, I won't see anything because the account's been suspended. I won't be able to access that. I will note that logging in through this button means logging in with root permissions, which means, or logging in with general server level admin permissions, which means that you will have a lot more power than the individual user might logging in the WordPress level. So this is very powerful. It also means that for troubleshooting, it might be hard to get a sense of what is affecting an issue at the user level because they have fewer powers than you, and so you may not be affected by an issue that is affecting them. The other thing I just want to look at, or two things real quick, is the quota and disk usage. So the quota, as I said, is the maximum amount of storage that a user is allowed to use. Disk usage is the amount that they're actually using. If a user starts getting close to their quota, they'll get some little alert emails that say, hey, you're at 75, you're at 80%. You may want to talk to your admin about getting a little bit more storage. If they hit their quota or exceed it, they'll start experiencing issues when they try and use their account. It is possible to change the quota on a one-off basis for a user. To do that, you would go in here and you would hit change quota, and it'll take you to a particular page. It's just loading for a second. And I would say, hey, let's give Meredith 1,000 megabytes. So, roughly a gigabyte. I caution generally against changing things on a one-off basis because it makes it sort of hard to track who's allotted what. And it also means that particular users may go, okay, so I can have more storage whenever I want. And they don't necessarily practice responsible file management, compressing their images, not uploading huge files to their account, which isn't really fair to other users who making sure that everyone gets an equal allotment of space on the server. So we're not going to give Meredith any more space. Besides, she's only using 2 megabytes. She doesn't need it.
I will also mention too that if you do change on a one-off basis, if for whatever reason we need to change the quotas back across the account to fix like an error or anything like that, the account will automatically go back to the package defaults. So
Yes.
if you need to, you should always try to change a package in a one-off basis, but also with further conversation with the user to kind of see what they're working with and that sort of thing before making those changes, just to make sure that you're keeping track of account management side of things like that.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to talk to users about the work that they're doing, how they're managing things, and just sort of see where they're at. It's a learning experience. It's great. The other thing that I want to point out just real quick is this download all records to a CSV file link. This can be really useful just if you want to get a sense of everything at once, all of this information. It'll bring in the whole CSV for whatever you've searched, I believe. We do also have other CSV reports that have other particular uses. We'll talk a little bit more about that in Meredith's and my long-term management tomorrow. That said, this can also be useful just for account management tracking information purposes. With that, we're going to go to disk space, which is the second, or show current disk usage, which is the second sort of basic informative place where you can go to find things out. It has one job, which is to tell you how much space is being used on your server. That's it. That's all. So right now we're using 47 gigabytes out of a maximum of about 150 gigabytes, which is about 30. It's about a third of what's available. There's not really anything you can do here. It's just an information readout if you ever want to take a look at what overall usage is like on your server. Similarly to if you hit an account's maximum quota, if your server hits storage capacity, it can cause issues. That said, we have automatic alerts in place to say, oh, hey, you guys are getting to 75, 80, 85%. And we will reach out to you to talk about how to manage that, whether it's adding more storage to the server or cleaning up accounts or some combination thereof. That's pretty much it for disk usage. We're going to hop to packages next, feature manager and packages, and then we'll hop to Installatron, hopefully, if there's some still time. So Meredith touched on packages in WHMCS, and I also just sort of mentioned packages briefly when we were on the list accounts section. The feature manager, the package, well, actually, we'll hop back out to the packages section in general. The package also harkens back to what Amanda was talking about with the ability to modify what cPanel features a user has access to. So if you wanted to remove all of the email features, you would go into edit a package. WordPress in the classroom, I believe, is the default. And then we'd go into edit. So this changes the size of a particular disk space quota. It's using 10 gigabytes. So Meredith is actually a little below average, but that's fine. These are the settings that every account will have. Every account with this package will have by default. And as we said, you can customize on a one-off basis, but this is a way of standardizing things. If you want to have separate packages, for example, for students and for faculty might get a little higher resources, a little more storage, etc., a couple more features available at the cPanel level, then multiple packages is a great way to do that without having to go in and change it one off for every individual faculty member. So this is currently using the default feature list, which is where we'll hop to next. It also says that the cPanel theme is Paper Lantern. Let's just go to the feature manager, and we'll look at that next. So we will manage the default feature list. If we hit edit, all right, we said we wanted to disable email, for example. So we'll just search for email. This is not all of the features that are available in the email block in cPanel, but it is everything with email in the actual name. And so let's say, all right, you know what? Let's get rid of all of this. We're going to uncheck email accounts, email deliverability, disk usage. No, let's get rid of all of it. You don't need any of this probably. And then we'd hit save. And I'm not going to do all of that. But what that means is if I hit save on that, every package that uses the default feature list will lose access to these features. WordPress in the classroom, which I believe is the default package for users on the server, will lose that. So the default package for server users, they'll all have access to that removed. And so this is just a great tool if you say, you know what, some of this stuff is just not something our users are really going to need. It's just something that we're going to take. It might be confusing. It might be overwhelming. Let's just uncheck it, streamline things a little bit, give them what we think the essentials are. On the contrary, you might say, you know what, let's give them everything. Don't worry about it. Let's let them explore. It'll be a sandbox space. And that's fine too. But this is the place where you would come in order to take care of that. Let me just see. I think that's everything I had for feature managers, which is great because it also means that I have time to talk about Installatron. And Taylor and Amanda are going to talk a little bit about Installatron in the future. I believe you guys are talking about site templating. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So site templating is something that you handle in Installatron. We're actually going to touch on some of the other features instead. Installatron, so if the feature manager and packages controls what general cPanel features a user has access to, Installatron controls specifically the applications that a user has access to, like WordPress, Omeka, Scalar, Grav. All of those are applications that a user can install using the one-click installer. The access control, we'll start there, is the place. Access control is feature manager, but for Installatron, basically. So if we look at this and we say, the other thing is that it'll note which groups are available. So you can say, well, for the default group, we'll change access, or for a different group, we'll change access. That, in general, we have schools say applications that are available will be available to people no matter what package they have. So people don't really use this feature, but it's available. So let's say, you know what, we don't need, what are these? Let's get rid of all of these. What is booked even? What's Dada Mail? So we would uncheck, we don't want users to see any of these. We don't want them to, you know what, MediaWiki's cool. We'll keep MediaWiki. We would use this uncheck feature in order to basically remove access. We'll go down, let's see, well, let's get rid of a couple more. The other thing that we have is the star feature. And star basically pins a particular application to the top of its section. So this is the content management section. Applications in this section, they are grouped by this. And so the star will pull that to the top of the list and highlight it in yellow so people will go, oh, I could start with that. So for example, Grav and Known, and let's see, I'll be very surprised. Where's WordPress? Omeka, yeah, here we go. So Omeka, WordPress, these are all featured as well. They get pulled to the front of the list, so users will see them first. So I think we've unchecked, you may also want to disable some schools in the same way that they want to get rid of email, they want to get rid of e-commerce and business, because the terms of use availability for university software and hardware just don't allow that sort of thing. So you can just get rid of all of it. If you want to get rid of a whole section, you can actually do that by clicking this little power button, and it'll just wipe out absolutely everything. Very, very efficient. You don't have to click things one by one. You scroll all the way down to the bottom and you hit save all. I'm not going to do that because in the same way that we're not changing the feature manager, this is just a demo. But if you wanted to, this is how. Also, similarly, if you don't want to do this, you can just give us a list and we'll take care of it for you. You don't have to do this manually, and you don't even have to do it yourself. If you've ever worked in cPanel, you may remember you may have seen the My Applications and My Backups tabs when you go into My Apps, which is a feature in cPanel. Installatron is a lot like that, except that it's server-wide. So what this is telling me is that there's 113 installations across the server, and 93 backups of those installations. So if we go in here, I'm gonna go very quick at risk of showing people's stuff off, but this is a list of all WordPress. This is a list of all things. So this account I think is suspended, which is why it's showing that. But we can search for WordPress, and that'll get us a list of, well, that's not right. But in theory, this will show you everything, and you can use Installatron features like back up or clone on anything. This number has changed. On anything on the server.
Yes, and Taylor and I will go into more detail on this specific section in our session tomorrow. So
yes, absolutely. So this is just a way to get a quick look at everything going on. Similarly, if you just want to get a look at all of the backups available, that's what the My Backups tab is for. And so for restoring or for downloading backups without going in at the account level, you would go here. I believe that's everything. One of the things Amanda said, and I mentioned that Amanda and Taylor will be looking at templating. That's just something that you can also do in Installatron. That's just a feature that's available to you, and they will talk more about that tomorrow. That covers everything on my list. Have I missed anything, or have I misrepresented anything? Even more important. Amanda, Meredith?
No, that was a great walkthrough,
great walkthrough of a lot of stuff.
WHM. We've got about 5 more minutes on the session, so if anybody has any questions, let us know in chat, and we can definitely take a look and go through some more options there. If not, we can break for a little bit of a break. On that side, and I see a couple people talking about access to WHMCS and WHM that they don't have access to that. Shoot us an email to edtech@reclaimhosting.com, and we can definitely get you set up with access to WHMCS and to WHM. So then that way you guys can kind of take a look through and explore those different options if you need access. I always like to tell admins that you want to try your best to work in the WordPress if you can, if you're troubleshooting any end user questions, if needed, to see what they see up front using that switch to tool that Amanda showed in the WordPress portal walkthrough. That way you just get a good view of what the student sees, because we do see the back end more often than not as administrators. So you want to try to replicate as best as possible what the end user sees first.
Yeah, and that's 100%. Something that Meredith and I will talk about in our session that goes more in depth in WHMCS as well. But that view that you get when you use that switch to in WordPress is going to be slightly different than the view you get when you're in WHMCS and you just log into cPanel. That it's not going to have the same, it's not going to be influenced by the same things that the WordPress portal view is going to be influenced by. So it's always best to get as close to the user's experience as possible.
Yeah. All right. Last chance, I would say, for questions. Otherwise, we will just sort of wrap this up. And then our next session is happening at 1 p.m. Or 1 p.m. Eastern, whatever that translates to in your time. So we will see you again then. And I believe that's Taylor and I talking about the WordPress portal. Yeah, so that'll be lots of fun. Anything else? Anything we're forgetting? No, I don't think so. All right.
Awesome.
This has been awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Time is flying quick. All right, we'll see you all after a short little break at 1 o'clock.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.